Hi, I'm Ernie Zor, and I have the pleasure of narrating Puritas Spring Software's 30-second Frequently Asked Questions video. Of all our videos, I think there are over 100 actually. The gift tax video is by far the most popular. So the subject I'll be dealing with here is split gifts. It's something that's regularly asked by our users, so I hope this video helps answer some questions that you might have. I'll try to give some typical examples along the way, and that should make it easier to understand how to handle split gifts. In 25 words or less, split gifts are gifts whose value is split between the spouses. And why would you bother with something like that? Well, you may not know it, but there's a tax on gifts when they reach specific amounts. So one reason spouses choose to split gifts is to avoid the gift tax. However, as you'll see, the cumulative lifetime exclusion amount is, at the time of this video, is over $11 million. So in many or most circumstances, you won't need to worry about the gift tax. Another reason is to stay below the $15,000 annual exclusion. I'll show you an example of that. And that means if both spouses are under $15,000 gift, you don't even have to file returns. Now, another reason is to double the available annual exclusion, even though there may be no tax due anyway, and we'll see an example of that. So let's start out with a simple example where there's no gift splitting. I'm not going to cover lines 12 through 18 because the consent of both spouses is required to split a gift. This lines 12 through 18 on either spouse's return identifies who the spouse is and the consent. It has to be signed. The donor, in this case Lewis, he's going to sign the return at the bottom, but Betty, the spouse, who is going to execute her consent right down here where you see the line for her signature. Okay. Let's take a look at this example in a little more detail. It's a $21,000 gift, and we'll see what happens when no splitting is. We'll go to page 2. That's usually the blood and guts of everything. Here's the $21,000. That is the total here in column H. We'll go to page 3 where where the annual exclusion is taken into consideration, and we see that leaves $21,000 minus $15,000. It leaves $6,000 of gift, and that's what ends up going to line 1 here on page 1 in part 2 in the tax computation, and that generates a $1,080 tax. And of course the tax is then subject to a lifetime credit of $4.5 million, so it ends up being no tax due, but that's how that happens. Now let's change things around a little bit and take a look at a different situation where the spouses elect to split the gift. Okay, here's Lewis's return. We'll go to page 2, and there we see the $21,000, only this time the checkbox there means that the spouses are electing to split the gift, and that means that half of it is only subject to taxation here on donor Lewis's return. That's $10,500. We go over to page 3 to see how that handles against the exclusion, and you see, where's the $15,000? Well, it's right here, but you don't need to take any more exclusion than what the actual amount is, so that ends up being $10,500. Bottom line is it's zero, and when you look over at page 1, in the tax computation section, you see that your starting number is 0, so there's never going to be any tax due. And let's see what else we have here. Because both taxes are, or because both amounts are under $15,000, I think I already said this, or if I didn't, here it is. No gift tax returns would even have to be filed. Let's try to make one though where there is something to file. So we're going to change this to where I'll load a different file here where there's $32,000 gift, and same old stuff on lines 12 through 18 to show the consent. Let's go to page 2. There's that $32,000. The election is the check box, $16,000, and that goes over to page 3 as the total column H, leaves a $1,000 overage, which goes to then page 1, line 1, in the tax computation section, and we see that that generates a $180 tax, and that's eaten up by the $4.5 million credit, so 0 taxes due. We might want to see now, though, about the spouse's, he or she, whoever the spouse is, has to file their return. So let's take a look at that one. That was this one here. Now, Betty is the donor, and Louis is the consenting spouse. We'll go to page 2 here. And now we see that the spouse, Betty, it's her gift, her consented gift, or however you want to phrase that, is also $32,000. Half of it is $16,000. $16,000 goes over to her return, on her return over to against her exemption, and so there's $1,000 left over, and again, there's no tax due, but we also only had to use, or I should say, we only had $2,000 that was actually taxable because we were able to utilize both spouses' $15,000 exemption, whereas if we hadn't made the election, that would not be true. And there is one other thing. I think that gives you the gist of that, but I would still like to show you one more thing, and that would be using, I'm going to use a $64,000 gift, but actually the amount doesn't make any difference. Lines 12 through 18, same old stuff. Here we go. Why is this different in that we're filling out both the top and the spousal portion of part 1 there? And the reason is that this gift, in the prior examples, we actually were assuming that the gift was made by one spouse and the other spouse was consenting to split. In this case, the property that was made, that was subject to the gift, was actually jointly owned by the spouses. So when they make a $64,000 gift, half of it, $32,000, is being made by the donor here, and the other half that you see in the spouses section, that's the spouse's half section of the $32,000. And so what we've got here is both halves are subject to being split. That ends up being $32,000 on Louis's return. Hope I explained that good enough. Maybe it'll come even clearer if we take a look not spouse, not Mary, what was her name? Betty. Let's take a look at Betty's return in this circumstance. And again, there may be a tax difference or an exclusion difference, but this between the $32,000 and the $64,000, there really isn't any difference. Let's take a look at page 2. Same exact thing, only this time this $32,000 is her half of the $64,000 gift, which electing split, only half of it is taxable. And down here, this is Louis's half of his gift. They're splitting. Oh, by the way, one of the reasons that this is required is because you can't, if you elect to split, you've got to split every gift that was made. So you can't pick and choose property and say, okay, this gift we're going to split, this gift we're not going to split. No, you elect to split, you got to split everything. So anyway, down here on we're in Betty's return now. Her gift, like I said, is up here, $32,000, and this is the part that is split from Louis's return, $16,000. Well, you know what? It may be confusing, but one way that you can always check and see if it's right is, in reality, this was a $64,000 gift that the couple made. And if you look at the bottom line for Betty's return, it's $32,000 is on her return. And if we were to look at his return, it would say the same thing, $32,000. So we're really reporting all $64,000 of the gift. But that's how we're doing it. A little convoluted perhaps, but that's how it goes. We could flip back to page 1. Not much in the way of interesting stuff because everything that we're doing is under the $4.5 million credit, so it still ends up being a 0 down here. But that's it. Now, I have one more thing I wanted to mention. Oh, I was going to also say that this particular example that we did just now with Lewis and Betty, residents of community property states might want to pay attention to how that's handled because it may be applicable in your state. And that's pretty much it for the examples. But one question I received recently was about the $4.5 million amount on page 7. That's the one, or not on page 7, line 7 of page 1. Somebody asked me one time, where's that for? I know about the 11 million thing, but what's with the 4.5 million? Well, where that 4.5 million comes from is that's really the $11 million exclusion converted to a credit against taxes. And if that doesn't make sense to you, and if you know a little bit about income taxes, you might think of it as the difference between an income tax deduction and how much that deduction actually reduces your taxes. It's never the same. And so that's the explanation from that. And oh, yeah, I hear the music. And that means it's time for me to wind it up. It's always fun to make these videos. And the only thing I regret about this one is that I didn't have the opportunity to do this earlier in the tax season. Hey, that's how it goes sometimes. I'll just have to think of it as being really early for next year. At any rate, I want to thank you for taking out time to watch this video. I really appreciate it. So until next time, stay healthy and happy, and I wish you all the best. Take care.